All right. Welcome back to another episode of Two Plane Sports and the second of this series where we rank position groups amongst the SEC. We're going to talk about every team in the SEC, all 16. Today's is over the running back position. If you missed the one over the quarterback position, make sure to check it out. It's already posted. Go to our channel. Videos going to be the first one up there behind this one. This one is really interesting. We did quite a bit of research, and it was really hard to get a solid top 10. It was pretty easy to name the back six, maybe back five, but there's some dogs in the running back group in the entire SEC, not just talking about Oklahoma. So before we dive into that, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, turn on the notification bell so you know when we post our next video. We are going to cover recruiting again at some point, but it's a little slower. Oklahoma's killing it already, having a lot of commits. So as we get further into the summer and into June, we'll go back to that. But we're going to be doing this series for a little bit to turn on the notification bell so you know when we are posting and so you know what we're posting about. Follow us on social, Spotify, and Apple Podcast. All right, let's get started. So we're like we did in our last video. We'll go from number 16 and up to number 1. So this time we did it kind of a duo as a duo instead of separate rankings. We're going to do just one list, 1 through 16, starting from the back. Number 16, Kentucky, headed by Chip Trayanum. I definitely butchered that name. Don't think I got that anywhere close to right. But he is a transfer from Ohio State. Last year tallied 85 carries for 373 yards, 3 touchdowns, caught 9 passes for 53 yards. And then, I mean, he is the guy that's looking to be the starter in Kentucky. Not a great look after we ranked Brock Vandagriff the worst quarterback in the SEC. Kentucky follows it up hot with potentially the worst running back in the worst running back room in the SEC. Brandon, give us some thoughts on why you agreed to put him at 16, and I guess is there really any hope for Kentucky going into 2024?
I mean, you kind of just shit all over the kid, which I kind of feel bad. I'm sure he's a nice guy and stuff, but
I'm sure he is.
he's a. It's not to say he's horrible either. He's a 4-year player at Ohio State. Ohio State's usually pretty good in that running back room, so he probably had a lot of competition there. But I mean, yeah, at the end of the day, he's a 4-year player there. Last year was the most carries he ever had in the season at only 85. 78 as a sophomore, 49 as a freshman, and in 2022 only 15. Maybe got some sort of injury issue or something like that. But I mean, he's never had more than 400 yards in a season. He did that as a sophomore. And his sophomore year was actually pretty good. I mean, he had 402 yards on 5 yards a carry and 6 touchdowns. I think maybe getting hurt that junior year kind of set him back. And then this most recent season, 373 yards. But again, that's at Ohio State, so maybe he was buried. I guess the hope here is for Kentucky fans, if you want to look at it, is he is now the guy, it looks like. So he won't be sharing touches, or he should have his most productive season as far as touches and turn those into the most yards. But as we get deeper into this list, you'll kind of see why we kind of had to put them at 16.
Yeah, and to give some hope, I guess, for Chip in Kentucky, they did have a really talented running back in Ray Davis. And I'm pretty sure he was the running back from last year. He was really good. They are replacing the offensive coordinator. They named Bush Hamden as their offensive coordinator. It is a program headed by Stoops, so it's hard to think they're going to be completely bad, but just when you look at their positions so far and what we've ranked, it doesn't look great. There's a lot of potential, but not a lot of proven production on the field. So moving on to number 15, Vanderbilt, headed by Cedric Alexander. Cedric, in the 2023 season, was a true freshman. As a freshman, he tallied 96 carries for 371 yards and 4 touchdowns, caught 18 passes for 133 yards, averaged 3.9 yards per carry. Again, it's looking bleak for Kentucky so far, or not for Kentucky, for Vandy so far as we rank the top running backs and quarterbacks in the SEC. They are now pretty much tied for dead last with Kentucky in our rankings. But they're young, and you would expect a guy like Cedric that got to play as a true freshman to take a step forward and improve on what he did as a true freshman at Vanderbilt, and hopefully get more carries, get more opportunity, try to get maybe 600-700 yards, and then show that he can be coachable. Because I mean, it sucks to say, but if he has a good season, that's an opportunity for him to be able to hit the portal and go to a team that needs a really good running back one or a good backup for the 2025 season. Brandon?
Yeah, that's the same thing we said about their quarterback too. Yeah, the New Mexico transfer. His name is escaping me at the moment, but yeah, it's gonna be a similar situation, improvement situation. Vanderbilt's rolling Cedric Alexander and AJ Newberry as their number two. They're both freshmen last year, so they're very young. Yeah, and again, I think they could be decent players, talented players, but the problem with Vanderbilt as a whole is just such a not great football program, and it's gonna set these kids back. And yeah, it's Vanderbilt 15. I think it's just where you have to put them.
Yeah. Moving on to 14, so we don't keep bashing on these guys because that is not the intention here. We're literally just ranking, and it's hard at the running back position. 14 is Mississippi State. They are headed by a senior in Jeffrey Pittman. Last year tallied 54 carries, 268 yards, one touchdown, caught 13 passes for 91 yards and two touchdowns. Their backup at this moment is looking like it's going to be Seth Davis, pretty young player as well. They do get the added benefit of having a new offensive coordinator slash head coach in Jeff Lebby. So they have, again, at this point, it's potential. They have the opportunity to improve on what they did last season. Mississippi State was just not a very good football team last season, so maybe not the greatest position to judge last season versus what they could be next year. But the hope is there for Mississippi State fans. Brandon, what do you think about their spot here at number 14?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're decent running backs actually. Jeffrey Pittman and Seth Davis. They're combined for about 600 yards together last season. I think that'll improve under Jeff Lebby. But just as you go along this list, it just gets better and better. So maybe they're not 14 in a Big 12 conference or whatever, but in a loaded SEC running back class, it's just kind of where they have to fall. But I definitely think with Jeff Lebby and the way he runs his offense, they should see a decent jump here. Although Jeff Lebby sometimes likes to get away from the run, sometimes likes to only run. So it's just going to be whatever happens with that game plan there. But I think they will improve under Lebby, but they just are a casualty to a loaded division of running backs here.
Yep. And I'm going to pass it to you for an explanation here on number 13, LSU, headed by Josh Williams.
Just the young. They're replacing some guys that are running back. Josh Williams had, last season he carried the ball 55 times for 284 yards. So, I mean, he averaged 5 yards a carry, 5 touchdowns. LSU's offensive line is supposed to be really good. But Josh Williams is – or not, they're not young, I guess, but Josh Williams is a senior here. But I can't remember who the number 2 is. But, yeah, it's just he's a 4-year player, never did anything crazy. 532 yards is his best season. He's going to be the number 1, though, so I think those numbers will jump for him. But, yeah, it's just they've got a good offensive line. He should be good. But, again, it's just – casualty to a loaded division of running backs.
Yeah, and they're number 2. When we were digging around, maybe we didn't look in the right spots, but we couldn't find anything or any multitude of articles that kind of agreed on who their number 2 would be. So we went with their true freshman, Caden Durham, someone that Oklahoma recruited hard, and we know that he can be an extremely dynamic playmaker. Someone that, with how dynamic he was at the high school level, could be a guy that gets an opportunity early on down there at LSU. Number 12, we've got Missouri, headed by a transfer in Marcus Carroll. Missouri does have the unfortunate truth of having to lose their starting running back in Cody Schrader, lost him to the NFL draft. He had a really good season last year, but they replaced him with a really good transfer in Marcus Carroll last year at Georgia State. He tallied 1,300 yards for 13 touchdowns on 274 carries, and then caught the ball 23 times for 234 yards. I mean, the dude moved the ball down the field, averaging almost 5 yards a carry, 10 yards per catch. And if you look at what they were able to do with Cody, you would assume that he's going to be a guy that gets the necessary opportunity. I think the reason we put him here, and Brandon, I don't want to speak for you, but I think in my mind they got down here again because of how loaded the SEC is at the running back position, and having to move from Georgia State to the SEC, and more specifically Missouri, where the expectations are now pretty high after having a really good season in 2023. You want them to try to redo that success, or replicate that success with the brand new running back. And you don't ever know if that's going to be a quick fix or if it's going to take them some time to adjust to the SEC and how much faster and bigger these guys are to compete against.
100%. And I think, and then they brought in Nate Knoll as well as an Appalachian State transfer. It looks like they're number 2. Also put up really good numbers last year. He had 835 yards. So they got this guy, Marcus Carroll from Georgia State, with 1,300 yards, and this guy with 800. So combined, they're over 2,000 yards, and everything looks fine and dandy. But yeah, they're coming in from Georgia State and Appalachian State. So the level of competition here is going to be a drastic difference. And I think what's also going to hinder them in this, or at least why I kind of want them at 12, is Missouri's receivers and then the way that they play, I think, is going to hinder them because, they've got probably a top 5 receiving duo in the SEC and guys like Luther Burden and Theo Weiss. So I think they're going to be more so a pass heavy offense. These guys are coming up from a lesser group of competition. And again, just a very, very good running back group in the SEC, but not bad. Definitely two solid transfers here from Missouri, but yeah, I think the receivers are going to hurt them here.
Yep. Moving on to number 11, Arkansas. We've got at 11 here, headed by Jaquindon Jackson. He is a transfer from Utah. Last year tallied 161 carries for 797 yards. That's nearly 5 yards a carry, 4.9. Ended up getting 4 touchdowns, caught the ball 9 times for 53 yards. Again, it's that transferring. Arkansas is in a weird place where they're replacing a lot. Quarterback, now running back, brand new head coach, someone that's familiar with Arkansas, but new as a head coach there this season. So we'll see how that goes, but they come in at number 11.
Yeah, I mean, an impressive body of work at Utah. Utah's a pretty good program. He did well there, 800 yards. He's a good sized running back. He's going to be the clear number 1 there. He's going to have probably the most opportunity he's ever had. They've got a decent backup in Rashad Dubinion. Yeah, I'm going to mess that name up, but yeah, I mean, it's a solid running back group. Not great for the SEC at least, but it's a group that's going to work. They've got with Jaquindon Jackson for 800 and the backup at 260. They're over 1,000 combined. The backup there is Rashad Dubian, but 2 guys for 1,000 yards in the SEC is pretty solid. I think it's a fair spot there at 11. And now we're going to get into the some really good rooms.
Definitely. All right, now on to the top 10. So number 10, this is where the list got pretty hard. We had a tough time going back and forth here, but at 10, we ended up putting Texas A&M, led by a junior in Le'Veon Moss. Last year, he got 96 carries for 484 yards, 5 yards a carry, 5 touchdowns, 11 catches, 84 yards. They have the experience. They're probably the team that, when we were talking about it, is bringing back the most familiarity in that running back room. They're not really coming in with question marks on who's going to be their 1 and 2. But Le'Veon Moss Really has to take a step forward this upcoming season, in my opinion, and that's why we put him at number 10 rather than a little bit higher on this list.
Yeah, Le'Veon Bell, number one. Good season, almost 500 yards. Their backup, Mari Daniels, is slated the number two, also a 532. So they're another team that's over 1,000 with their two combined running backs. I think they edge out Arkansas here because they've got 3 or 4 running backs that are going to be involved in this offense. They've got E.J. Smith there as well, running back Emmitt Smith's son, who's going to get some carries. So they've just got a lot of mouths to feed. Pretty solid running back room altogether, though. And yeah, I mean, I think 10 is – it's really hard to do this. But like this list took us a lot of time to compile, just because it's tough. And you guys should try to do the research and look at it yourself. It's loaded.
Definitely, especially with the running backs. I think this was a little bit easier with quarterbacks somehow, and maybe because the quarterback position is so criticized, and it's easy to look at the stats and try to do a little bit of recall with what we watched, but it's not easy with these running backs for some reason. So moving on to number 9, and it might be controversial to some, especially the fans of this program, if any are watching this. But we put Auburn at number 9, headed by Jaquez Hunter, going into his senior season this fall. Last year, he tallied 159 carries for 900 yards, almost 6 yards a carry. That's 5.7 to be exact, 7 touchdowns. Caught the ball 18 times for 118 yards last season. Auburn, who had a really bad passing offense, really bad. When you watch them, it was pretty tough to watch, almost Iowa-like when it came to passing the ball. But they could run the ball really well, and that's basically what kept them alive in that Iron Bowl this last season. They were running the ball well. Peyton Thorne was making some good passes, but whenever Auburn kind of caught their stride a little bit and were starting to look pretty good is when they were running the ball efficiently. And Jaquez was one of the guys that helped lead that run game. Now he looks to be the leader of the run game down in Auburn. Brandon, what do you think about Auburn at 9 here?
Yeah, I think we have Auburn inside the top 10 there because we are so high on Jarquez Hunter here. 900 yards in the SEC, really impressive. You mentioned the 6 yards a carry. That's obviously really good. 7 touchdowns. I think their backup is kind of what brought them to number 9. And why they're not higher. Their backup is projected to be Jeremiah Cobb, very young. He was a freshman last year, had 172 yards and 2 touchdowns. But they do meet that 1,000 yards combined between the two of them. You don't anticipate that pass game to be much improved this season. It's the same quarterback going in there, so probably be a very run-heavy offense again. Look for these guys to probably replicate what they did last season. Keep them inside the top 10 there for running backs.
Oh, yeah. Moving on to number 8, Florida, headed by not so much a new face, but not the guy probably a lot of Florida fans would like to see because they did lose their number 1 to the transfer portal. But Montrell Johnson looks to be heading the running back room down in Gainesville. I think the reason we put him here is because this guy has been the definition of consistency in that running back position, especially as the backup running back to Trevor Etienne. Over the last 3 seasons, he has not gone under 800 yards. Last season, he tallied 152 carries for 817 yards and 5 touchdowns. Caught the ball 30 times for 236. So a guy that can run the ball downhill and is good at catching out of the backfield. Total of 6 touchdowns. One of them was through the air. So Montrell now getting an opportunity to be the lead back down there for Billy Napier and the Gators. I think that because of how consistent he was as a backup, looks to be a guy that can make a huge jump on this list. But as of right now, on our list, lands at number 8.
100% agree with you. I think the consistency aspect of his game is why they're sitting at 8 here. 800 yards only all 3 seasons in college, 2 of which being in the SEC. 2 years ago, as a sophomore, he had 10 touchdowns. I think with Trevor Etienne being gone, being his backfield now, if you will, this guy should probably go for 1,000. He'll probably hit that 1,000 thresh mark this season. Set himself up nicely to be a draft running back after this year. He's a solid running back there for the Gators.
Definitely. Now moving on to number 7, Alabama. Not a position they're normally the Bama fans and really the program of Alabama are used to being not a top 3 team at every position, but this year they go in after losing Jace McClellan, a guy that was their lead back for a couple seasons now, and some Bama fans weren't really fans of him, especially after that bowl game to end the season. But Justice was a highly rated running back in the 2023 class, if I remember correctly. That room just has a lot of potential, and I think that's where you and I basically agreed on. While they don't have a ton of experience, they come in with a ton of just elite talent that it can be put to use in the right places can be a really nasty running back room led by Justice down in Tuscaloosa.
Yeah, I mean, if anything, we put Alabama at 7, and that's us doing them a solid, just giving them the Alabama name, and we know they're going to be good. They're Alabama. Kalen DeBoer is he's an offensive minded coach. He's going to get these guys going. But yeah, like if on the stat sheets, they are not as good as the guys we have below them. But again, they're Alabama. They've got dogs. They're on the offensive line. They're going to be good. They're young. They've got Richard Young there as well. That's a name OU fans know from recruiting a while back. They've got mouse feed. They're gonna be Alabama. But 7, I think, is fair because this room
Yep.
is, or this league is deep.
Very deep. Now we're cracking into the top 6 here, and we put Tennessee at number 6, headed by Dylan Sampson, the guy that was their number 3 running back last season. Last year, again, as a number 3 running back, tallied 106 carries for 604 yards, 7 touchdowns, caught 17 passes for 175 yards, and 1 touchdown. Now he goes into the 2024 season as a lead back. And if you remember last year, they had Jalen Wright as their leader. He was drafted into the NFL. I can't remember their backup. He was also moved on to the NFL. And you get the guy that was a sophomore last year, give him the opportunity to be the lead back after having that kind of season as the number 3. You expect to see a lot of really good things from this Tennessee running back.
100%. That's the reason that they're so high on this list for us. Is I mean, to be able to put up 600 yards on 100 carries, about 6 yards a carry, or 6 yards a carry. They're 5.7 to be exact, because he's a little under it. But I think to do that as a number 3, now the keys are kind of handed over to you. You just got to expect to see a big jump. Probably a 1,000-yard guy. He's pretty tough.
Definitely. Now we've cracked into the top 5. This was tough, and maybe a little bit of bias here when you look at 5 and 6. And I definitely did this in the quarterback list. But we have Oklahoma at number 5, headed by Gavin Sawchuk, Jr. Redshirt sophomore, going into the 2024 season. Last year, he tallied 120 carries, 744 yards, 9 touchdowns, 14 catches, 94 yards. And really, as Oklahoma fans, we know better than others that don't watch Oklahoma every Saturday. This guy didn't get his opportunity till later in the season, and he still tallied over 700 yards, almost 10 touchdowns, averaging 6.2 per carry. Like, now that you go into the season and you expect him to be the lead back from day one, I don't think it's crazy to assume that he's a 1,000-yard rusher in the 2024 season, assuming his offensive line gets put together quickly so he can just get back to where he finished last season.
Yeah, I mean, we had J.A. on our quarterback list at 6 and 7, respectively. I think I had him 6. You had him 7. But this is similar to Jackson Arnold. They're going to go as far as the offensive line will allow here. Gavin Sawchuk, 744 yards, 6.2 yards a carry, 9 touchdowns this season. You bring in the UTSA transfer and Sam Franklin, who's projected to be the number 2 in my mind. Over 1,000 yards on 6.2 yards a carry. I think that's a very healthy 1-2 punch moving into this league here. You've got Javonte Barnes, who's got a ton of potential as well. Caleb Hicks. We kind of know this running back room more than we know any other running back room, obviously. But I'm going to say it's similar to what I said about Jackson Arnold. I think that the talent is there. They can get things clicking. If the offensive line can do what it needs to do, I would not be surprised if this Oklahoma running back duo, potentially trio, is closer to the top 3 by season end.
Agreed, and that's definitely a homer take, probably, but I love it. Maybe number 1. Why limit ourselves to top 3?
We are an
Top
Oklahoma
3 or 2,
podcast
though.
at the end of the day. I mean, I
That's
think
definitely true.
we're doing this pretty fair, though. I mean, we didn't put Jackson Arnold at number 1. We didn't put our running backs at 1. We think that there's a possibility they finish at 1, a realistic possibility.
Yeah, and I mean, when we go into 1 through 4 here, I think it's going to be pretty apparent that we put them as high as we possibly could, because 1 through 4 has nasty running backs to head their running back room. At number 4, South Carolina, headed by Raheem Sanders. Last year, he did suffer an injury, tallying 62 carries, 209 yards, 2 touchdowns, 10 receptions, 75 yards. But the reason we have them ahead of Oklahoma and in the top 4 is because in 2022, in his breakout year, he had 222 carries, 1,443 yards, averaging 6.5 per carry, 10 touchdowns, 28 catches, 271 in the air, and 2 touchdowns. This guy was the definition of what you want in a number 1 running back, especially going into his second year that he did. He had a breakout season now, recovering from an injury. You expect him to get back to where he was as a sophomore or in his second year. At least that's what I'm sure Shane Beamer is hoping for out of his number 1 running back. But that's why we have him at number 4. Sanders, if he can get back to what he was in 2022, has the opportunity to be the best running back in the SEC.
Yeah, I mean that's 100% the reason they're number 2. That 2020 or for number 4, that 2022 campaign he had for Arkansas. So we did it in the SEC. It's not like he's playing whatever conference you want to say here, but he did it against SEC competition. So there's no knock on him there. But to have 1,400 yards, but the craziest part about that is he averaged 6.5 yards a carry while doing so. So it wasn't like he just had 700 carries for 1,400 yards. Like he was making the most of these carries to put up 1,400 yards. 10 touchdowns, but he also caught the ball 28 times for almost 300 yards, 2 touchdowns. Yeah, very dynamic player here that South Carolina has. I think what might hurt him here is he's easily going to be their best player on offense. I think teams will be able to load the box against him and kind of let Lenora Sellers beat them or try to beat them. I think that might be the game plan here. But I think they also brought in Juwan Howell, South Carolina State running back. Dude put up almost 1,000 yards there at South Carolina State. So decent 1-2 punch at running back. The South Carolina rushing attack should be solid. Again, assuming offensive line holds up for them and their quarterback can pass the ball as well. They can't be one-dimensional. The talent is there for sure.
Definitely. Moving on to the top 3. Number 3, Ole Miss, headed by Ulysses Bentley the 4th. Last year was the backup for Ole Miss. Got 94 carries. 540 yards. That's almost 6 yards per carry. If you want to be exact, it's 5.7 per carry, 4 touchdowns, 11 catches, 87 yards, and a touchdown. He now gets to lead that running back room at Ole Miss after Quinshon Judkins decided to hit the transfer portal and go to Ohio State. It was kind of out of nowhere, but now he gets his opportunity, and it's his turn to take advantage of that opportunity and try to push this Ole Miss team and the Ole Miss offense to the next level, because they look to have a really good 2024 campaign as a team.
No, yeah, 100%. And they're just, I think we're similar to Florida there with Trevor Etienne being gone. We're putting a lot of faith in their current starter. We're doing the same thing here. Ulysses Bentley to put up almost 6 or whatever he put up, 540 yards on 6 yards a carry. Again, being his team now, he should be able to get close to that 800-yard mark, because they also brought in an LSU transfer who put up, and Logan Diggs, who had almost 700 yards on 5.5 yards a carry. So it's a healthy 1-2 punch there in Oxford. And you got to trust Lane Kiffin. You got to trust Jackson Dart. That offense on paper should be humming. I think all these players that have on offense should have a lot of opportunity to put up numbers, and I think that's why we slide LSU, we slide Ole Miss into that 3 spot.
Yeah, and for them, I think it's definitely the situation that they are going into, being in a Lane Kiffin offense. You have two very talented running backs that can try to reproduce what Quinshon Junkins did last season. There's a lot of chances there for them to be there to be breakout years for both of those guys. All right, top 2 time. And if you've been tracking all these teams here throughout the video, you know which ones are going to be in the 1 and 2 spot. You just don't know where they're going to be. Number 2 here, in our opinion, Texas, headed by a sophomore in C.J. Baxter. Last year, he actually started as their number 1 before he ended up suffering an injury. Before he did get hurt, was doing pretty well. Ended up ending the season with 138 carries, 659 yards, almost 5 per carry, 5 touchdowns, then 24 catches for 156 yards. Really, I think if it wasn't for that injury earlier in the season, probably could have had better numbers and been a solid 1-2 punch with Jonathan Brooks, but now he gets to lead it alongside with Jaden Blue, who is going into his junior year. Texas has produced really good running backs over the last 2 seasons, and Brandon does have a Texas expert in his household, and he kind of sold us on the idea of how good they've been at producing quality running backs over the last few seasons.
Yeah, they're. I think what also helps Texas here is in both of our quarterback rankings, we have Quinn Ewers at number 1 and number 2 respectively. I think him being able to sling the ball around. Yeah, they lost a lot of talent at receiver, but I still think it's probably a top 5 receiver group moving forward. As much as that sucks to say, that offensive line on paper projected to be one of, if not the best offensive lines in the country, especially in the SEC, wherever you want to rank them. There's going to be a lot of help there for those running backs. They have produced the last couple of seasons with Bijan, with Jonathan Brooks. I don't really expect them to take a step back at all, unfortunately. This is not at all to suggest that Texas is not beatable. I still think Oklahoma hammers them in the Red River game, but on paper they're a pretty good program.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, this is just on paper. A lot of things change when these players actually hit the football field in the fall. But at number 1, we have Georgia, headed by transfer Trevor Etienne. Last year for Florida, tallied 131 carries, 753 yards, 5.7 per carry, 8 touchdowns, 21 receptions, 122 yards, and a touchdown. And maybe others see it differently, but whenever I saw him hit the transfer portal, it was kind of a surprise. You think that he would have stuck it out at Florida after being there for a couple seasons already, seemingly being one of the better running backs in the country. Now he heads to Athens, Georgia, where he can be the premier back for a premier SEC team, premier college football team in the country, and compete for a national championship. Brandon, shed some light here for the people as to why we have Georgia at number 1 in the country.
Well, it's something that I like to do. Not like to. I'd like to see them be dethroned, but and again, I understand Georgia did not win the SEC last year. That was Alabama, but you look at their last 4 or 5 years body of work. Georgia they're the cream of the crop. They're the team to beat. I think going into the SEC this year, they will again be the team to beat there. I expect Georgia to be Georgia on the offensive line. I expect Carson Beck to have a pretty quality season. I think there's so much talent on this Georgia roster. I think that makes running lanes easier. I think that makes everybody's job easier. Georgia's a tough out, unfortunately. Again, I'd like to see somebody dethrone them consistently. I'd love for Oklahoma to be that team. It's just gonna. They're the team to beat in my mind. I'm probably going to have them towards the top 1 or 2 in almost every single position group we break down. I think they're just that. They're just them. They're that kind of program right now. They're on a pretty solid run.
Definitely. Well, that rounds it out for our running back position ranking in the SEC. I'm sure we did something that you guys all disagreed with. Hopefully some of the stuff you do agree with, but this was fun making, and we're gonna have fun doing the rest of the position groups throughout the rest of this off season. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Turn on the notification bell. Follow us on social media. Everything is linked down below. And if you prefer to listen, Spotify and Apple Podcasts, follow us there. Leave a review, leave a rating. We appreciate it when you do. We will see you next time.